Hey everybody. Welcome to my IG page. I'm popping on to talk about songwriting. I just want to get into it. If some people come in the room, you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to ask some questions. You're welcome to chime in. I want to talk about songwriting. Songwriting. Let me tell you something about my background. My father was a singer and a songwriter, and I was exposed to music from day one. When I was born into my family, the Rome family in Los Angeles, my dad was a quartet singer. He sang with a quartet by the name of the Spiritual Five, and we were part of the National Quartet Convention of America, and therefore every other year we went to the National Convention. So I was exposed to gospel music, particularly quartet music, from the very beginning of my life. I was exposed to it on a national level, which I believe gave me a broad appreciation for not just quartet music, but all music, because I heard it from different regions of the country. And in that they were somewhat different. The sound was slightly different. Even though it was the same genre of music, it was very educational and very broadening, if you will, of my appreciation for music. So that's kind of like the very beginning for me. I grew up in a very musical church, Travelers Rest Missionary Baptist Church in Los Angeles, and we had awesome musicians and awesome ministers of music who, every one of them, I gravitated toward. People like Professor Frank Williams, Professor Marvin Jenkins, and John Terry. And those were the main three while I was there. And I gravitated to them. And today I would say I realized that it was because I had the same thing in me. When I began to realize that I could write, that I could compose music, and that would have been between the ages of 11 to 13, between that age of 11 and 13, I began to realize that I could write. It just happened naturally. At the age of 6, I sat down at the piano for the very first time, and I picked out Lean on Me by Bill Withers. Very easy to pick out of the piano. And so that led to me playing the piano, and that just led to the natural talent and the gift of playing. It just came forth, you know. It just came out. And then my mother insisted that I take piano lessons. I loved it. I enjoyed it. It was fantastic. I did that. And then during that process is when I reached that 11-year age stage that I began to get musical ideas. Just musical ideas would come to me. Words would come to me. And I would write them down. I would record them back in the day of tape recorders. I would just record my ideas. I'd write down the words. And of course, the reason why I say that I came to know I could write between the ages of 11 and 13, because those 3 years were like, though they were developing years. My writing kind of developed in stages. The very first time, I didn't just sit down and write a complete song. I had musical ideas, motifs, just musical notes strung together that gave a definite statement. I had that idea. And then I went from there to developing those ideas and putting them together with other ideas. And that happened over a period of 3 years, from 11 to 13. Those 3 years, I was a developing songwriter. All right. So I wrote my first two songs between 12 and 13. And I remember the very first song I wrote was not a gospel song. I called myself trying to write a love song or a love song. I didn't call it a love ballad. It was a love song. And it really wasn't a love song at all. It was a breakup song because it was called I Don't Want You No More. I was young. Hey, I was young and I was growing. I was learning. I was just trying my hand at something. The very first gospel song that I wrote was a song entitled Jesus is Calling. Jesus is Calling. That was the very first gospel song that I wrote. And when you people talk about repetitious songs today. My first gospel song, it was full of repetition. For the most part, all it said was Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, calling now. Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling now. Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling now. Calling now, calling now, calling now. Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling now. Do I remember it? I actually do remember my very first gospel song. And I will say this. My cousin loved me so much, and I guess people were loving the song. I was a child writing writing this gospel song, and it was a salvific song. It was a song to win souls to Christ. So my cousin, during her studies at Stanford University in Palo Alto, California, she invited me up. This was 1980 and 81, during the first 2 years that I organized my ministry in Los Angeles. She invited me up, and she taught the song to the gospel choir of the Black Students Union on the campus of Stanford, 1980-81. And they even recorded it. I'm laughing because when I tell you the song was repetitious. And look, as I'm sharing, you guys, you can interact with me. You can say hello. If you have a question, you can ask a question. I'm not going to be too long, but I wanted to get on here and share this and hopefully encourage and inspire someone. If you're not a songwriter, I hope it speaks to your creative abilities. If you're a creative in any area, I pray that it will be encouraging and inspiring to you. And then if you are a songwriter, I pray that it will definitely be informative and inspiring to you. And like I said, if you'd like to ask a question, just come on, talk to me. If you'd like to chime in, chime in. But yeah, the very first song, as a matter of fact, can I give you a little bit of it? Some of you all are on here. Can I share with you a little bit of that song? The very first gospel song. If somebody will just give me a yes or whatever, give me hearts. Hey, Gregory Hunter, bless you. If you want to hear the very first gospel song I ever wrote, then give me a thumbs up and say, yeah, let's hear it, let's hear it, let's hear it, let's hear it. Because I want to interact with you if you're in here. Okay, I got a heart. Thank you so much. Now, remember, I said it was very repetitive, and it's like, Lord. But this was my first song. And I wrote this between the ages of 12 and 13. 12 and 13. It went like this. Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, calling now. Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, calling now. Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling now. Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, calling now, calling now, calling now, calling now, Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling, Jesus is calling now. Oh, I forgot the other part. But that's what is my favorite song? Thank you, Lady Diamond. What is my favorite song that I have written? Today, my favorite song that I've written is a song that no one has heard. Because I've recorded a lot of my material independently. Well, a few people have heard it, but it's never been public like the songs that most people know me for. But it's a song that I wrote called I Was Just Thinking About It. I call it an inspirational song. And I'm working on releasing that now that we can do things digitally. But that's my favorite song. Live in Me, Jesus. That is, I'm grateful for that song. And one of the things I'm going to do, if you stay around or if you come back later or whatever, I'm going to share the inspiration behind the popular songs that many of you might know. But this is why I really wanted to do this live today, songwriting, because I have a different perspective about songwriting. And then sometimes I think it's not as different as I might think it is. I just think that many times in the body of Christ, we don't create a platform nor a space for authenticity, even though we always throw that word around. You know, be authentic, be authentic. And the reality of the matter is many times the masses do not fully appreciate authenticity. So I like talking about that a lot, but I don't do a lot of it because I go into circles where, and I'm going to be raw and real, you guys, okay? So if you get offended, let me know. If you like what I'm saying, then let me know. But a lot of times when we're talking about songwriting, particularly gospel, sacred or whatever, we're talking about a certain sphere of influence rather than our true pure hearts. That's what I normally pick up. We in Christendom, in the church, the Christian church, etc., we get deep. And so I'm not interested in getting deep today. That's not why I'm doing this live. I'm actually doing this live so that I can begin very purely sharing where my music, where my songs came from, where they come from, why I do it. So my favorite song is a song that most people who know me nationally and even worldwide, because I thank God that my music has afforded me the opportunity to travel to other nations and teach the music and develop choirs and work with singers. I'm grateful for it. Let me start with Live in Me, Jesus, because Live in Me, Jesus is the song that the industry, or if I'm ever put in the history books, it would be written that this is probably my most popular and successful song as a solo artist. Live in Me, Jesus. Live in Me, Jesus was born simply out of, all right, let me create the scenario for you. Remember I told you that in 1980, I organized my congregation. I may not have told you that, but in 1980, June of 1980, I organized my congregation, Hope of Glory Christian Center of Los Angeles. During the first 2 years of that pastoral planting, if you will, I did not do extra musical things. I didn't do music outside of my congregation. That was because I knew that it was important for me to establish a new work. So I took 2 years to establish that work. So I didn't do anything with choirs. I didn't do anything solos. I didn't do appearances. All my music was for the congregation. All my music was there except for 2 times. For those 2 years, every year I would do an annual concert as a fundraiser for the ministry. Those 2 years, 80 and 81, my cousin invited me to Stanford University for the Black Students Union to, again, sing at their annual concert where she had taught them some of my music. And they even recorded that very first song, Jesus is Calling. So I was sitting at the piano during one of these concerts because this was my practice. And I always desired to write new songs for my concerts. I always wanted to write new songs for my concerts. So that's what I did. I sat at the piano and I would just get still and quiet and I would just thank God for the gift of writing, and I would just expect for it to pour. And that's really how this song was birthed. I sat there and I just began to hear this idea as I was going through the process of writing several songs. Live in me, Jesus, have your way in me. And it just, the words and the melody just began to flow. Now, it didn't flow consistently like the whole song just came to me, but the words would flow, the melody would flow. I would work with that. I also would work with chord progression being added to the melody and the words, because I was a pianist, so I understood chord progressions, and I understood how different chord progressions can work with different melody lines. So these melodies would come and I would work on them, I would work them out. So in reality, for me, songwriting is both about being inspired and crafting a song, developing a piece of art. It's both inspired and both skill. I believe that we should develop our skill to utilize that which God gives us naturally. Just like you practice piano and you practice bass, you practice the organ, you practice a trumpet, tuba, whatever the case may be, I believe that we should practice every gift that we are innately endowed with. If we, I just realized I could write, these ideas would come. And so that's how Live in Me, Jesus was birthed. I will say this, that Live in Me, Jesus, even while it was being written, it became my most prevalent desire and prayer. As I wrote the song and completed the song, it wasn't until years later, that I found out that this theme, Live in Me, Jesus, Jesus in me, was throughout my life, and I believe that was by divine design. When I was younger, before I wrote this song, one of my favorite songs was written by Eddie Robinson in the 70s, and it was recorded, and it was Reflection of the Man Inside. And it says, on Sunday mornings and weekdays too, people observe all you say and do. Let the life you live be a reflection of the man inside. That was one of my favorite songs in the 70s. And it was played on the radio, but it never became, a big, what we call a big hit. But it ministered to me. It spoke to me. And so I began to realize that I was writing Live in Me, Jesus, and that was my desire. And still to this day, that's my primary prayer. Live in me, Jesus. I may be the only Jesus that this generation will ever see. Now, that was not original. I heard that somewhere. I don't even remember where, but I know I heard it. It had been said a few times by people, and when the song was inspired, and as I was crafting it, that phrase was deposited into my thinking, and yes, that works. One part of the song that's kind of original, I had not heard it before, was the phrase that says, not just I'll be your legs to walk, I'll be your mouth to talk, because that I'd heard that too. Tell the world through me you love them, show the world through me you love them. But the phrase was, I'll be flesh for you, Jesus, if you will be spirit living in me. That was original. I had never heard that before, but again, that came from my knowledge of the word. That's what I believe that the Bible teaches us, particularly in the New Testament. Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us, and he came to dwell not only with us, but to live in us. Glory to God. Jesus came to live in us. So that's how that song was birthed. And I'm saying this for a reason, but I'm trying not to be, I don't want to bash, I don't want to criticize or anything like that, but many times we think that successful, powerful songs are written out of some tragedy or some, and I don't agree with that. I really don't agree with that. Forgive me. No, don't forgive me. I said I'm going to be raw tonight. That's not the case for every songwriter. And I say that because those of you who might be listening who are songwriters, don't ever allow anybody to tell you how God is going to operate through you. And don't allow anybody to ever tell you that what God gives you is not good. Never allow anyone to tell you, and don't you believe it when folks say, oh, that's nothing. No, if God inspires you with something, it's good, it's awesome. It may need to be developed. Watch this. Watch this. It may need to be developed, but it's good because it came from God. All right? It came from God. So even if it's just for you, there are some songs that probably nobody will hear that I wrote, but you better believe I love those songs. Now, let me say this. Let me say this too. Let me say this about songwriting. And this is my perspective. This is my approach to songwriting. I know that I write the way that I do because of my development, because of my environment. All right? Let me just go ahead and say this. I said I wasn't going to talk in this vein, but I am going to talk. I am a songwriter, okay? Calvin Bernard Rohn is a songwriter, not because of the industry, not because of ministry, not because of whosoever. I am a songwriter because, number one, God gave the gift. Number two, I fully accepted and embraced the gift. Number three, it blesses me. Now, let me say something. I'm going to tell the truth. It blesses me emotionally and psychologically. It brings me satisfaction. When I sit down and write songs, it makes me feel good. Now watch. The fourth reason why I'm glad I'm a songwriter is because somehow I've been able to write some songs that people enjoy singing them, and I'm able to go to the bank. So it's been a financial blessing. And all of that for me is God and good. Hello, somebody. It's God and it's good. So if you're a songwriter and you're hearing this, whether you're in the live room or you're listening to it later, please understand that whatever God has given you, it is not conditioned by or on other people. Stop that. Deliver yourself. Even if the industry does not celebrate you, God didn't give you the gift to be celebrated by the industry. The industry is man-made. Get free. I make no apologies. I got on here to be raw and to be real. I am personally, let me see, I like to use the right words. I am just inspired to tell my brothers and sisters who are gifted by God to embrace it, celebrate it, and run with it. And if the industry does not embrace you, there is a people who will embrace it. Why? Because the Bible says that your gift will make room for you. You'd be amazed at how many people are making money through music, songwriting, and you will never know their names. You'll never know their names. Now, I'm not saying that if you want to be a part of the industry, I'm not saying don't go for that. I'm not saying don't go after that. One thing I am saying, particularly if you're a child of God, will you please tell the truth and be for real? Stop being phonies. Stop trying to be spiritually deep. God is the very foundation of our lives. I wake up in the morning because of God. I breathe because of God. Hello, somebody. God don't step in and do something and then jump out. The Bible says, in him we live, move, and have my being. Y'all got to forgive me. Not only am I preaching to you, but this is my reality. This is how I think. I don't go to church to worship God. I don't go to no building to worship God. I worship God wherever I am because God is God everywhere at all times. When I wake up in the morning, I'm not bragging. I'm just sharing with you, trying to help some people. May not help all of you, but some. When I wake up in the morning, I give God praise. And I'm giving him worship and I'm giving him praise. I'll sing. Ain't nobody around. Worship is to be our lives, brothers and sisters. It's our life. And I'm not talking about deep. I'm not talking about religious stuff. I'm talking about life. I have a relationship with my Creator. He's my Heavenly Father. And when I wake up in the morning, I greet my daddy, my Heavenly Father, and I say, hello, Dad, thank you. I go into prayer. I ask him for things. I tell him the things I think. I tell him how I feel. And I lift my hands right in my own room. Ain't nobody watching me. I lift my hands before God. I speak well of God. I praise him. I'll sing songs. I'll even dance in my house. I enjoy dancing in my house more than dancing in church because I've always had two left feet, and I don't want no people laughing at me when I dance. So, songwriters. And again, I'm trying not to make this a teaching session, but I just want to inspire and uplift. So I'm coming from my perspective and how I approach songwriting. Here's another thing. Okay, if you all are enjoying this, let me know. But here's another thing about me as a songwriter. Like I said, I'm a songwriter because I am. That's God's doing. And I kind of laugh. I remember being in junior high and high school, and I was writing and singing and performing. And people, who I went to school with, they see me now after not having seen me for about, 10 plus years, well, more than 10 plus years, like 30 or 40 years. And they come to me and say, Calvin, are you still singing? I look at them like they're stupid or something. I'm sorry. I told you I'm going to be raw and real. But I really do. And my mind be I said, are you stupid? Ladies and gentlemen, I sing because I'm a singer. I don't sing because people applaud for me. I don't sing because I had a record deal. I don't sing trying to get no record deal. I don't sing because people tell me they like it. And it don't bother me if they don't like it. I sing because God made me a singer. Come on, somebody. Listen, when I start preaching, I didn't ask nobody for no opportunity to preach. I wasn't thinking about preaching in no pulpit in nobody's church. I went to convalescent homes and began preaching. And watch this. I went to one convalescent home every week. And when I got to that convalescent home, I read a few verses of the Bible. I shared a little bit real brief. And then I sang from the hymn book. Your gift is not supposed to be managed and controlled by man. Men, whatever the case may be. And I don't know, something in me is making me fierce to tell my brothers and sisters that. Are you hearing me? I want to tell my brothers and sisters, free yourself from the clutches of man and evil. You are God. Watch this. Not only is your gift from God, but you yourself are a gift from God. Somebody write that down. You don't have to write it in the comment section. Write it in the comment section. You need to post it. You need to tweet it. And here's how you need to say it. I am a gift from God. I am a gift from God. Some people light up when you show up. May not be the people you always want to light up, but somebody rejoices when they see you because you bring them joy. You. I'm talking to you right now. Yes, you bring somebody joy. Whatever you do, some of you, your voice lightens people's heart. Your writing, your skill, your ability, your looks. Come on, let's stop submitting ourselves to evil and the enemy. That's put that all out. God made us. If I got a big nose, it's God's doing. Somebody like my big old nose. Okay, I'm getting all off. But watch this. All of this actually inspires my writing. I had a friend many years ago. Oh, and I mean, he was a dear friend. He was a good friend. And I just had this idea. I want to write my friend a song. And I did. I wrote him a song. And that song was Your Love Comes Shining Through. Your love comes shining through. Now, I'm going to tell you a little secret. I may sing a little bit of it for you. But I wrote the song just the way I wanted to write it, just the way I thought it, just the way I was inspired. And when I say I was inspired with, I wasn't having no deep trance like, oh, Jesus. I wasn't out of it. No. Calvin Bernard Rohn seems to be tuned in to sound in the universe. I hear music all the time. And every now and then when I write songs, I say that I'm either capturing it or I'm tuning into it, and it just begins to flow. Sometimes it'll flow like a flowing faucet, just continuously. Other times it comes out like spurts, you know. It'll come out in spurts, and it'll just happen. It'll just happen. But when I wrote this song that I'm talking about, Your Love Comes Shining Through, I just wrote it as I wanted to write it. It says, today I had some sad feelings, had some lonely impressions, but that's all right. Your love comes shining through. I wanted to cry a river of tears and break under the load of my fears, but I was strong knowing your love comes shining through. And you know, it goes on. Well, guess what I did? I wanted to test the waters, and I wanted to see if the song itself would work. So when I was signed to CGI Records, my very last recording with them, which is called Joy Will Come, did not do very well, in my opinion, because they didn't do well with the marketing and promotion. They had no plan for it. But we did a wonderful 2-week tour on the East Coast, sold out everywhere we went, and, you know, oh, wow, it did really, really well in those areas where I went. But I put it on that project, but I flipped the words. Any songwriters in here? I flipped the words. Instead of singing it just as I wrote it, I made it refer to Jesus. So now I just turned around and I sang it to Jesus. And I may have added a few more words because I know how the saints are. You know, it ain't gospel if it ain't got Jesus' name in it. So I put his name in it. But it was still entitled, Your Love Comes Shining Through. And I was talking about Your Love Comes Shining Through. Thank you, Snoopy. But guess what? After that CD, it was CDs then, after that CD was released, I began to get calls and I began to get hits. What was popular then? I think it was MySpace or whatever. Y'all remember MySpace? I started getting hits, and what surprised me was one of the first persons who contacted me and said they loved that song, even though it never got radio play to my knowledge. But they had purchased the whole CD and they listened to that song. It was a bishop friend of mine. It was a bishop, and I thought that was so amazing. But, you know, I knew I was testing the waters. But I loved the song. So, like I said, I wrote that song because I wanted to write a song about my friends. And I am a proponent. Listen to this, all you songwriters and creatives. I'm a proponent for creating art that's for more than a worship service. I can't get no amens in here. Did you hear that? I encourage you. Write songs, write poems, write spoken word, whatever, craft, paint, draw, sculpt, whatever you do artistically, do it for beyond the worship service experience. Music is not only, watch what I'm about to say. Music is not only for the worship service. It's not only for church. Music is for life. Now, as a Christian, I believe it should always honor God. It should always respect God and his righteousness and his holiness. But God's holiness is not only about... That's not all. That's not all. That has its place. But every now and then it's all right. If you have a folk song or if you have a work song, or if you have a love song, why shouldn't God's people be writing the most wonderful love songs that bring husband and wife together? Why not? Why shouldn't we write all these different kinds of songs? And I'm not just talking about the genre in terms of the musical styling. I'm talking about lyrics. The Bible does not only talk about Jesus dying for our sins. That's the central message. Read Song of Solomon. Some love poetry going on in there. What? So broaden, I encourage you, broaden your perspective. The major thing is this: listen to the Spirit of God in your life. Follow God in your life. God, watch this, God is already everywhere, but he needs representation everywhere who's aware of his presence so that they can jumpstart the awareness of others of his presence everywhere. I don't care if it's in the clubhouse. I'm not talking about clubhouse on the phone. I'm talking about in a club. If it's in a club, if it's in the theater, if it's on television, if it's in the mall, doesn't make any difference. In the halls of Congress, God desires representation. So just follow God with your creativity. That made me think of something. I just thought about something. Come on back. I wanted to say something about that. But no, God wants us everywhere. He wants us everywhere. When I began writing, particularly to those songwriters who are on here, and you can share this with other songwriters, let them know, check this out, and I believe it'll bless them. Listen, when I realized I could write between that 11, 12, 13 ages, I decided as I was growing from that time, and I was matriculating through junior high and then high school, I determined I wanted to be a writer for hire. It was never my simple desire to be a songwriter in gospel, or that wasn't my choice. It wasn't my desire to ever be an artist. I really, Calvin Bernard Rohn, flesh and blood, I really wanted to be a school teacher and ultimately a college professor for years. And I wanted to study for years in the university. That's where I wanted to live my life. And then on the side, I wanted to be a hired writer. Now, what is a hired writer? I'm glad you asked. A hired writer is one who writes for hire. In other words, people hire you to write songs. Many times when you write a song for hire, on paper, you don't own the song anymore. You get paid by that person, by that corporation, or that institution or whatever to write the song, and that's done. You sign it on. Those of you who ever deal with copyright, when you get that copyright form, to copyright your song, you have your SR form and your PA form. And on the PA form, which is the basic standard form that you would fill out as a songwriter, it has a space that says, is this a song for hire? And if you sign there, then what you're doing is you are acknowledging that I was hired to write this song, which means I paid for a certain amount. For example, if you say, okay, I'll write you a song for $5,000. Hey, Clark, when you write a song as a song for hire and you say you're paid for, and I'm just making a hypothetical situation. All right, the business is about negotiation, so don't take this as a lesson of what you should do. But when you write a song for hire and you're paid whatever you agree to, if it's $5,000, if it's $20,000, hello, whatever, you can no longer claim royalties on that song once it is released. Once they begin to use it the way they wanted to use it, then you're done because you got paid because you were. Now that's the kind of situation that I actually wanted to be in, because I wanted to write commercials. I wanted to write songs for corporations. Let me tell you about two things I did that I found was very interesting. Number one, I wrote a jingle for my answering machine. Y'all remember when we had to record the answer on a small tape recorder for your answering machine at home? Before there was voicemail and all that, I wrote this little jingle, and it started getting some attention of some people. But it was a little song that says, when you call in, I'd say, hello, hello, I cannot receive your call, so leave your name and number and a message, and I'll get back to you soon. Now wait for the beep. And I did that, you know. I like stuff like that. I like ideas like that. And I will say, at my age now, sadly, I didn't pursue it more. Simply because I will say the reason why I didn't pursue that avenue is because I got caught up in what I was doing in gospel music. I got caught up in what I was doing with gospel music. So I never went in those other routes. I did have opportunities at times, and some things panned out, some things did not. I remember writing music for a play that was written by, I believe his name was, Tim Wolfe. I think it was Tim Wolfe. He wrote a little play when he was living here. A wonderful white guy. He was attending Greater Bethany back in the day. If you're in Los Angeles and you've been here a long time, you know about Greater Bethany. And he wrote a play, and I wrote the soundtrack. I wrote the music for it. I forget the name of the play. I really did. It went on. We performed it. We developed, and it was developed, and someone else took it, and they took it to other states and so forth. And that was a wonderful experience. I would love to do that again. I would love to write for a play again. I would love to, compose for other things. And of course, when you do that, there are laws or rules that you have to, operate by in order to do all of that. But I'm really just talking about songwriting, being a songwriter. And like I said, I'm being raw, I'm being transparent, I'm not trying to impress nobody, I'm not trying to be deep, I'm not trying to say, I'm a Christian writer. No, I'm a songwriter. I write because I can, and I want other creatives to embrace freedom and embrace joy. Do what God has gifted you to do. All right. Another song that I did, I was working with these three guys. They were, I've worked with several groups, two girls and this guy, and I've worked with some young ladies on the secular side. I was, and I don't know, I was kind of just working to help them develop and to sort of make a name for themselves, get out there. And I guess I did that because I started preaching early. I was in church. My gospel music career started at 8 years old. So my parents, as long as my daddy was alive, I wasn't thinking about trying to pursue no secular anything, because that was just the way he was. But anyway, I took the liberty of working with others and helping them to develop. So I remember there was this one group, three guys. They were good. They had a manager, and they would go in different places, doing clubs and everything. And I was their trainer. I was their coach, vocal coach, everything. I was their songwriter. I would write them original material. We had tracked some original material, and the manager, who was also the photographer, got it to a group of people who decided, anybody on here from Los Angeles remember the Coconut Grove? The original Coconut Grove? Oh my God. On Wilshire Boulevard. On Wilshire off of Western, not far from Western. Coconut Grove. They were having a dinner in honor of Coretta Scott King. And I thought this was so unique because it was not in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. They were honoring Coretta Scott King. And so, Jamel, what you said? Do you don't know about the Coconut Grove, do you? Do you know about the Coconut Grove? But anyway, they heard them and they liked them. And so what they did is they put them on the program. They put them on the program to perform at the Coconut Grove on this event in honor of Dr. Coretta Scott King. So what happened is That same year, Shirley Caesar came out with a song about Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King. Because of that, they wanted to draw a name, so they got Shirley Caesar. Now, what was interesting is the headliner of the show was Jennifer Holliday. Jennifer Holliday was the headliner of the show, and yet they also brought in Shirley Caesar. They had several other acts that were on, but these guys were going to be like an unknown act. And all of a sudden, they called the manager, the organization that was putting this on, called the manager and told the manager, we're going to have to bump the guys. We're going to have to bump the guys. And I didn't want them bumped. So when the manager told us, I said to him, excuse me, now remember, this was a dinner in honor of Coretta Scott King. Shirley Caesar was being invited because she had a song dedicated to Dr. Martin Luther King. So I told the manager, I said, would you call them back right now? We were actually in a rehearsal. I said, call them back right now. Tell them, would they find a space for the fellas if they came with a song specifically dedicated to Coretta Scott King? I had never heard of a song written in honor of Coretta Scott King. So he called and they said, we'll give you 24 hours, literally 24 hours. Within 24 hours, I sat there at the piano and I composed a song called You Keep the Dream Alive. Don't ask me if I remember it. Don't ask me where it is. I know I scored it. I'm looking for it. I got to look for it and find it. But I wrote this song called You Keep the Dream Alive. And what I attempted to do was lyrically tell the story of her journey as a wife, as a support to Dr. Martin Luther King, and then going through his death, whereas you could have given up, you could have thrown in the towel. No, you decided to keep the dream alive. So we honor you because you keep the dream alive. See, that's the kind of writer I always wanted to be. That's the kind of writer that I see myself as. And so I wrote the song, and guess what happened? You got to say, guess what? No. We got that cassette to the group, the team. I taught it to the group. I taught it right. Within 24 hours. I can't tell you how long. I don't remember those details, but it was several hours. We were starting in the wee hours of, early evening, and it went into the wee hours of the morning. But I had to get that cassette because I said, this is sometimes the work you have to do to make it happen for yourself. We got the tape to them, and guess what? They decided to let the fellas sing on the show. And now I can say he's a friend of mine. At the time, H.B. Barnum was the conductor for the show. He was the musical conductor for the show. He heard it, and he then called and said he was going to use the music as the opening and closing for the show. I'll never forget that experience. I'll never forget that experience. And I shared with you to say this: sometimes, even when it seems like there is a no, you keep pressing and you keep pushing, you might be able to keep that door open. You never know. But sometimes you got to go beyond yourself. And at that time, I pushed myself. I pushed myself to write a song. And I will say this: I literally crafted that song. I understand music theory. That was my foundation of music. I had to learn music theory when I took my piano lessons. When I went to college for music, I had to learn music theory. I had to understand arranging. I had to understand melodies and motifs, phrases, and I had to understand lyrics. I had to understand rhymes and prose and all those kinds of things. I had to understand that. So, like I said, songwriting is not just about creating by inspiration. Well, God gave it to me. No. That's a part of it. Now listen. You know it's the truth. You get inspiration. If you're a creative on here, you get inspiration all kind of ways at all kinds of times. You can be driving down the street and see a billboard and get an idea for a song or a melody or a little jingle. I say to you, Capture that. Remember that. Jot that down. I wrote a lot of songs on napkins. Anybody else wrote songs on napkins on here? I remember one time we were celebrating Ricky Grundy years ago. Ricky Grundy. We were celebrating Ricky Grundy. Ricky Grundy and I kind of grew up, in the same circle. We were friends for a long time. And I literally wrote Ricky a song. Work gloves, Javale, okay? I wrote a song for Ricky Grundy as I was thinking about who Ricky Grundy was. And actually, I wrote it as I was preparing to go to the dinner. We were having a dinner downtown. What was that? Was it at the Bonaventure, one of the hotels? And his family was putting together a dinner. It was wonderful and fantastic. And I wrote a song. And some of the words I wrote on a napkin, because even after I got there, I hadn't finished the song. But that was the kind of person I was. Now, you can't always do a lot of that today because things are a little bit more structured and programmed. That's one of the things that I do miss from the past, and sometimes I try to sneak it in, but it is what it is. If you're doing a concert, you can do that. But if you're doing an appearance, it doesn't always work. But nevertheless, here's my point. Don't close the door to your own creativity because of what other people say. Now, just write that down, repeat that, and grab a hold of it. Don't close the door on your creativity, your inspiration, your flow, simply because of other people. If you have the gift, that gift will make room for you. You might have to. Oh my God, Lord, I don't want to get into prophecy. But listen, you might have to leave your present sphere of influence to really excel at what you desire most to excel in. Because sometimes the people who think they know you but don't know you internally, they will many times become a hindrance to your soaring. They'll become a hindrance to your soaring. Why? Because they're used to seeing you right here. I'm going to tell you the truth. That's just like me. I know that when people heard Calvin Bernard Roan, I've been classified as a traditional gospel artist. And what's interesting, when I decided to travel with Reverend James Cleveland, when I decided to work with Reverend James Cleveland through the 80s, I was with him for several years, quite a few years. I had one friend, and because I'm not going to call his name, but I had one friend. He was a manager of other artists at the time. And he had heard the music that I had written and put on cassette tapes prior to my working with Reverend Cleveland, which began in 1982 with the Los Angeles Gospel Messengers. But he heard stuff that I'd written before in the 70s. And he heard some of that music because, I allowed different people to hear it from time to time. And he questioned me. He said, that don't even sound like you, Calvin. Why are you going? He really questioned why I was going to travel with Reverend Cleveland. Well, I prayed about it, and I was released in my spirit. God gave me a release. Said, go, because primarily I knew I was going to be on the road quite a bit. He said, go, I'm going to teach you some things. You're going to learn some things. And, of course, when it was my time to leave the road and to stop working as an employee for Reverend Cleveland, the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me. And one day I'll tell that story too. But I left off the road, and I left traveling with him. Because if I was his main musician and MD, I had to be on the road. Let me say this much. When I was Reverend James Cleveland's musician, see, he was an institution. James Cleveland was an institution. I respected him as the king of gospel music. Wherever he went, if he was invited to a city to merely MC a program, he took his musician. It was kind of like, how a preacher take their own organist or take their own musician. It was that kind of situation. He was the king of gospel music. Whenever he was at the mic and desired to go off into a song, I had to be there so that I could play that song. And therefore, I knew all the songs that he would sing. If he decided to do something that I didn't know, that nobody knew, he would come to the piano and play himself. So, you know, I'm just sharing that little bit. I'm saving some of that because that's for my other book. But as a songwriter, don't allow yourself to be limited. But here's what I'm saying. I went on the road with him, and it began to influence a lot of what I was doing. How many of you know the song New Jerusalem? Anybody on here know New Jerusalem? Jerusalem, dum dum, do do do. Jerusalem. Well, listen. The way you know the song is not the way I wrote and arranged the song. Not at all. I'll say this in the beginning. I'm going to explain something. When I wrote the song, thank you, Calvin. When I wrote the song, who don't know that song? Okay, watch this. When I wrote the song, now watch this. You know how people talk about, you know, why are we trying to be like CCM? I don't think most people are trying to be like CCM. I think that's how we get influenced. We hear a sound that that influences us, and guess what? We will get inspiration like that, or we'll just attempt to write a song like that. I wish we would just let creativity be creativity. Wow. Anyway, you remember when I told you that I was doing a song every year for my congregation? When I began the first 2 years, I didn't do music outside. It was just inside. Well, I was doing a concert that I called old school music. I would always do old songs. Now watch this. My grandfather was a preacher. The few times I heard him preach, just about every time he preached, at the end of his message, once he opened the doors of the church, once he extended, salvation to people, he always ended with this chorus: when the battle is over, we shall wear a crown. And my grandfather had this robust operatic sing, both my grandfather and my uncle, whom I'm named after, my mother's only brother. They sang that operatic and had that bass, strong bass. When the battle is over, we shall wear. And my grandfather would say, sing! He would yell out at the congregation to sing. Anyway, that song always stayed with me. So when I was doing this old school concert, I was saying, let me sort of spruce up the old school material that I was going to do. So I started with that song. And as I thought about it, when the battle is over, we shall wear a crown, my mind went to Revelation. And all of a sudden, I started hearing that it was in F. Those of you who are musical, I heard it from that D minor C chord with E in the bass to F, the tonic. Dome, 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 dome. Now, my groove had the dome, dome, dome. At that time, back in that time around the 80s, what we know as CCM was called inspirational. And it didn't have a whole lot of changes. So when I was playing it, it stayed on the tonic, on that F, on the one. When the battle is over, till we shall wear a with the melody, but the bass stayed on the F. If you're musical on here, you might can hear what I'm talking about. I just stayed on that F. But when Reverend Cleveland touched it, the chords moved with the voices. It moved. And of course, that's the way many times gospel is written. So way back then, late 70s, early 80s, I was writing, and by my influence, by my exposure, I was doing the things that my Caucasian brothers were doing in their songwriting. Just like they sometimes borrow from us and try to do like us. I wish we would stop being I'm not going to use the word that I want to use. I wish we would just learn to be understanding. You like what you like, and that's okay. I like what I like, and that's okay. But let's celebrate everything because it belonged to God ultimately, and it comes from God, and it's for the purpose of glorifying God. Now, my time is about to end because IG only goes so long live, so I only got 40 seconds left. So I'm going to have to come back and do another one of these. If you enjoyed it, let me know. Even after it's over, let me know. And look, I'm going to leave it up so people can watch it again. All right? Thank you all for watching, and thank you. Love you much. I'm going to come back and do a songwriting part 2. Good night, y'all.